Wow, I way overdid it. Summer is over for us, and after weeks of having the kids home, feeding them, after barbecues and parties and things like that, we have a lot of things on hand. And I want to try my best to go through it and make meals with whatever we have on hand instead of going shopping. Several months ago, I went 4 or 5 weeks without grocery shopping except for spending $25 on fresh produce, eggs, and dairy. So I want to do something similar to that. I'm not sure how many weeks we're going to go. So let's see what we can do with the ingredients we have on hand. So let's get started. Now you may recognize this recipe because this is my meatless meatloaf recipe. However, this time I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm making meatless meatballs. Now, if you really don't like meatless things, I implore you to try this recipe. It is really, really good, and I think it's going to change your mind about doing some interesting meatless meals. But first, in a bowl, I'm smashing my cooked lentils and adding the oats and the cheese. Now, if you don't want to smash them by hand, you can blend them. I personally like to have some of the whole lentil pieces. I feel like it gives a really good texture to the meatballs or the meatloaf, but that's totally up to you. If you have picky eaters and if they see beans, they won't eat it, maybe try the blender and see if that works. After you've blended up all of that, then you can fold in the cheese and add the eggs and all the seasonings. There is a lot of seasonings in this, so you can imagine how much flavor is in this. Now I'm using ketchup, but if you don't like to use ketchup or you're looking for lower sugar options, you can just use tomato sauce from a can, or you could even make your own homemade tomato sauce, whatever you want to do. After that's all mixed together, now I'm just going to be making the meatballs. And I've made this a couple times since this time because it's just so good. One of my favorite recipes. And I find that you can just drop the mixture like in tablespoons, like drop cookies. Just use a tablespoon and drop them on the baking sheet and then bake them. And since this was my first time though making these, I wanted to see how they would do in a frying pan, like sort of, browning them in a pan. And I did test this out and they did brown beautifully. However, when I put them in the sauce after that, they just completely fell apart. So my favorite way, which is nice, my favorite way to make these are in the oven. You can see they got nice and golden brown and they really held their shape really nicely in a sauce. And for that sauce, again, I'm using ketchup, but you can use tomato sauce or even some diced tomatoes, whatever works for you. And I'm adding some soy sauce and some apple cider vinegar. And since this was a test, I'm making just a small portion of sauce, but I do recommend doubling it. I'll put the recipe down below if I can fit it in the description for you. If not, just use my meatless meatloaf recipe. And I also have, this is just kind of like a sweet and sour meatball recipe that I also have. I'm going to try to put it down below for you so you can have it. If not, I'll just put the sauce and then you can use my meatless meatloaf recipe for the meatballs. But in any case, this sauce is so, so good. You can add brown sugar to it if you want a little bit more sugar. You can see here I'm testing out those pan-fried meatballs in here, and when I start mixing them, they just fall apart. You can see that the oven-baked ones didn't fall apart, so I love that, and I'm going to continue just doing the oven-baked option because it's easier anyway, less messy, then I don't have to use any oil, and it's really great. So if you haven't tried the meatballs, though, you've got to try them. So I'm taking out the ones that are all broken apart and just putting them for my husband's lunch the next day and adding the rice in there, and I'm pairing the rice with the meatless meatballs to make a complete protein, and look how delicious. I served it with spinach and cucumbers for a little side salad. This was so, so good. The next meal I'm making is something that I had in my freezer. This is a freezer meal. It's Southwestern chicken and rice, and I had made several freezer meals a few months back just to make things a little bit easier on those busy days, and it is time for me to do this again. So maybe after I fully clean out the fridge and freezer, I will do another video on freezer meals. So I'm just going to thaw that out for 24 hours, which I did. Then I just put that in the oven and just let that cook until it was nice and heated through. And I had some lettuce on hand, so I decided to add that to the bottom of the bowl. And you can see I made a quesadilla for my picky eater son. And I'm just going to add a little bit of the Southwestern chicken and rice on the side with some veggies and some chips. and I'm going to top our lettuce for mine and my husband's bowls because my kids just like to have things separate for whatever reason. So I'm just going to kind of do theirs deconstructed, and then I'll add everything on top for mine and my husband's bowls here. And I'm just going to top it with some fresh tomatoes from the garden, some cheese, some salsa, some Greek yogurt, and then some chips as well. And this Southwestern chicken and rice is very easy. It uses just a few ingredients: black beans, rice, chicken, salsa, and some seasonings, and I believe corn. But I'm going to put the link for my freezer meal post so you can see all of the recipes that I use for the freezer meals and my last video. And that way you can go ahead and make that if you'd like to try it. It is so, so good. So this next recipe, I decided to use all these homegrown tomatoes and a few random ingredients from my freezer. You can see that I usually just throw my veggies in the freezer whole. So I have whole zucchini, whole bell peppers, whole garlic cloves, whole tomatoes. And when I'm ready, most of the time, if it's like bell peppers or tomatoes, I'll just give them a rinse, put them on the cutting board for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then cut those. And frozen garlic cloves, you can just chop right away. They're usually pretty soft still when they're frozen, or if you want, you can chop them in advance. But I just find they're so, so easy to prep from frozen. So I just usually throw them in there without, any prep because it's just faster for me. Same thing with bell peppers and tomatoes. There's no reason to chop them in advance, and I find that it's super easy to just chop them just like that. Now, I did have some beans that I prepped in the freezer, so I let those thaw out a day in advance. Then I just drained and rinsed those and set those aside. Then in a large pot, I heated some oil and added my tomatoes. And I just stirred that until the juices were released, and then I added some tomato paste, which I also keep in the freezer in a Ziploc bag in individual portions. I added the tomato paste, let that cook through and get a little bit golden. After a couple of minutes, I added the rest of my ingredients. So I just added my drained and rinsed beans and the bell peppers, and then started adding seasonings. Here's the fun part. You can add any seasonings that you love for chili, which is what I'm making here. I just decided to make a random chili, so I'm adding salt, pepper, garlic powder, marjoram, oregano, chili powder, a ton of chili powder, a little bit of cayenne, and then I'm just going to cover it and just let it simmer, stirring occasionally so it didn't stick to the bottom. And I'm just going to let that simmer away. You can do this for about 30 minutes to an hour, however long you want to simmer it, which is nice about chili. You can kind of just cook it ahead of time and let it simmer and stay warm on the stovetop for quite some time. In fact, you could even use a slow cooker or an Instant Pot to keep this on low for a little while as well. So that's kind of nice. And towards the end, I decided to finally grate a carrot into the chili to sort of offset the acidity from the tomatoes. And that worked really well. You can use sugar instead. I have read you can also use a little bit of baking soda, but I have not tried that yet. So let me know in the comments if you've tried that. Let me know how that works out for the acidity. And I went ahead and put the leftover lettuce on the kids' plates because they love that. Some carrots, some chips, and cheese. And then I had a couple of zucchinis from the garden that were about to go bad. So I diced those and added them to the chili towards the end, just letting it simmer for about 5 minutes more until the zucchini is cooked through. I don't like mushy zucchini, so I just add it towards the end and make sure it gets cooked through. It really is super fast. I wanted to use that zucchini for muffins, and I will do that eventually. I still have some growing, so I'll try to get to that soon. Now, I ended up pairing this chili with some cooked rice. If you put rice with beans, you create a complete protein, and that was my goal here because we didn't put any meat in this meal, so I wanted to make sure that we had a complete protein here. So I added the rice to all my bowls, and of course I have bowls for tomorrow for my husband and I, and I'm adding all of the chili on top of that. And then I have the chili on the side for the kids too. So we have plenty of portions here. I usually cook for 4, but because my kids are smaller, then I usually have all of these extra leftovers too. So it's great for lunch the next day. I topped it with Greek yogurt and cheese, and that was it. This next dinner idea is a lemon butter tilapia. I had some tilapia in my freezer, and I wanted to make sure that we use that this week. I had some lemons that were growing on the tree that I needed to use as well. So I just melted about 3 or 4 tablespoons of butter and grated some of the frozen garlic straight into the melted butter, added some zest and lemon juice, mixed that up, set it aside. And with the tilapia, I had that thawed out in the refrigerator, added it to a large casserole dish, and then I just seasoned both sides with salt, pepper, thyme, and paprika. But you can really add any seasonings that you love here. Really, the sky is the limit. Always add seasonings that you love. Then I just topped this with that butter mixture, and then I had my oven preheated at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and it only took about 15 to 20 minutes or so to make sure that tilapia was nice and cooked through and flaky. And in the meantime, we just cooked some frozen broccoli in the microwave, and this meal ended up being so fast fast and easy. It was crazy. I would call this definitely a 20 or 30-minute meal, depending on how quick you are with prep. And that was it. And I did make some mac and cheese on the side for the kids because there just wasn't quite enough for everybody. So I did serve a little bit of mac and cheese from the box for the kids. Now, this next day, I'm making a picnic lunch because we're going to go to the Orange County Zoo. And I decided it would be fun to sort of bring the lunches with and use some of the random ingredients I had in the fridge, like some of this leftover peanut butter, which I make myself. If you remember, I just discovered that you can blend peanuts in a food processor for about 8 to 10 minutes, and that creates peanut butter. So ever since I discovered that, I just buy peanuts now so I can have peanuts for snacking, and then I just make the peanut butter that we're going to use. And now I never throw out old peanut butter. It's amazing. And I also decided to use the leftover spinach and cucumbers and a homegrown tomato here to make just a really easy cucumber sandwich with a little bit of mayo. And you can season your vegetables. That makes a huge difference. Add a little bit of salt and pepper on top of your vegetables to really add a ton of flavor. And that was it for the sandwich. I ended up prepping some of the cucumbers in advance for later on because I believe we're going to have salad too. And I just like to get all that prep done in advance if possible. So anytime I have dishes out and I'm chopping things, I like to make sure I can prep other things as well. I just put some blueberries and grapes on the side, some random snacks from the pantry, some chips, some Baby Bell cheese, some pretzels, and then I just packed this all up in a lunch bag and we were out the door to the zoo. This is one of the zoos that we have nearby. It takes about an hour to get there, but it only costs a couple dollars to get in, and it's all local animals that were rescued. We love it. Then we just sat by the playground and had a picnic lunch. It was great, and I hardly had to use any ingredients. It was a very inexpensive sort of day out. Now for dinner, I'm going to go ahead and make some more rice and then grab some of the ingredients from the fridge here. I'm going to be making a stuffed poblano pepper. I bought these poblanos on sale a week or so ago, and I wanted to make sure that I use them before they go bad. I grabbed some tomatoes that were homegrown and some leftover brisket that we had from a barbecue that we had. And I'm going to go ahead and freeze the rest of the brisket too, but for this dinner, I decided to just chop some up and use it for the filling. I've made stuffed poblanos all kinds of different ways. There's just a ton of different options. For this one though, I'm doing some of the chopped tomatoes, brisket, and I am going to be adding some frozen corn as well, and some rice and cheese, and just a lot of random ingredients. So really though, you can make this Italian stuffed poblanos. You can really stuff the peppers any way that you like. But for this recipe in a large pan, I just heated the brisket. It released some of the fat, and I used that to sort of saute everything. I added the tomatoes and some seasonings and just let that saute and the tomatoes release the juices and let it all come together. Then I added my cooked rice and some frozen corn and just mixed that up, and then continued cooking until that corn was heated through, and then added some spinach. A lot of this stuff I just did randomly. I had no plan. I just started adding things. Once the spinach was nice and wilted, I added that to the poblanos that I had par cooked in the oven for about 10 minutes or so, then topped it with cheese and then put it back in the oven until that cheese was nice and melty. Only takes about 10 minutes or so in addition. And that's it. And you can top this with hot sauce, Greek yogurt, whatever you want. In case you're wondering if we ever have sweets, I did go ahead and cook one of the boxes of brownie mix that I had on hand. I've had it for ages. I have no idea why. I rarely make brownies, but that was just one of the things we ended up using up in the pantry. Now for the next dinner idea, I'm making one of my all-time favorite meals, and you've probably seen this before if you've seen my channel, but I'm going to take some of the black beans out of the freezer, thaw those out, and I'm using some of the leftover brisket and the sweet potatoes from the pantry, and I'm just going to give those a good wash. And yes, I am making loaded sweet potato fries. And you can actually use the peels from the sweet potatoes and make some crispy sweet potato peels. I learned that recipe from Plant You, the new cookbook that she has, that Carly Bodrug has. And you can do that with peels from regular potatoes too. It is just so, so delicious. So to a mixing bowl, I'm adding the sweet potatoes that I chopped into fry shapes, adding some avocado oil, and I'm just going to season with a little bit of salt and pepper. And I like to do 2 separate batches, one batch for my kids and one for my husband and I, because for for us, we add chili powder, but the kids, they don't like the spicy things. So I'm just going to do some salt and pepper and separate out part of these because they love sweet potato fries. I have picky eaters, but they will eat sweet potato fries. So I try to make these as often as possible because they are just so good, so full of nutrients. We love it. So now I'm going to go ahead and season the rest of these fries with some chili powder and a little bit more salt. And then I'm going to put those on a baking sheet and just let those bake until they are nice and crispy. This usually takes me about 30 minutes or so in the oven at 425 degrees, but I always recommend tossing and checking frequently because depending on the size of your fries, they may be faster or take a little bit more time. Now I went out to the garden and picked another tomato. I'm just getting some toppings for my sweet potato fries, and sometimes I don't do meat and sometimes I do. So this time, since I had the brisket on hand, I went ahead and added that just in the interest of using things that we have on hand to really stretch the meals. And I'm making the lime yogurt sauce as well. And I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of lime juice and grate some of the frozen garlic cloves straight into some Greek yogurt, a little bit of salt, give that a good mix, and I'll set that aside. And I will say that the lime sauce is optional. You can just use Greek yogurt or sour cream, but if I have a lime on hand, I will always mix up the lime sauce. It is so, so good. But always just make substitutions with things that you have on hand and make this your own. You really don't have to follow this to a T. I heated the brisket on the side and just added the black beans just cold, which is fine because I'm going to be putting this in the oven once I top my sweet potato fries with the beans and the cheese. For me, I'm not having any meat. I just don't love meat, so I don't always have it. I just had it with beans and it's perfectly fine just like that. And again, for my kids, I just served it deconstructed for them because that's how they like it. Once that cheese was all melty though from the oven, I just added my tomatoes, my Greek yogurt lime sauce, and a little bit of hot sauce. You can add salsa, you can add avocado, so many things you can do to make this your own. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use my lentil vegetable soup from the freezer, one of my freezer meals that I made back when I did the freezer meal video. I think back in, was it December, January? I can't remember, but this is what I'm going to be doing tonight. I did not thaw it in advance, so I'm going to probably saute it and then put it on slow cook. So let's get started. So today I'm going to be using my Instant Pot because it does slow cook, and also I think I'm going to be needing to saute it first. Let me get it plugged in and started. Okay, so I'm going to take the lid off here. So now that it's open, I'm just going to see it's not thawed at all. But it's kind of pliable. Instead of using canned tomatoes for this recipe, I use fresh tomatoes. And so there's not as much liquid. And so it makes it really easy just to pull this from the freezer. But you're not supposed to slow cook directly from the freezer because then it won't come up to excuse me, it's so loud. It won't come up to temperature fast enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and saute it first. But I'm going to add 8 cups of water or so. I'll be right back. Alexa, tell Moen to pour 8 cups of water. Okay, I've got my 8 cups of water. I'm just going to put this back in and put it on saute so we can get this going. And I think I'm going to put it on high. There we go. Okay, now that it's been on saute for about 25 minutes, we're at 131 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm just going to let it go about 5 more minutes on saute, and then I'm going to turn it on to slow cook, probably on high because I only have a few hours before dinner. And I bought this separately, by the way, so I could slow cook without having to use this lid so I could see what's going on. That's in my Amazon storefront if you want to take a look, but they have a bunch of different styles on Amazon too. So it's been about 3 hours since I put this on slow cook, and it's looking really, really good. I checked it about half an hour ago and decided to put it on low because the lentils are cooked through now. Look how delicious. So now I'm just gonna plate it. I'm gonna put it in bowls, and then I'm just gonna top it with some Parmesan Reggiano, and dinner will be ready. So easy. And this is so delicious. You can season it too to your liking. We're a lower sodium household, so I don't put a ton of salt in things and just kind of season to taste, but that's up to you too, of course. And if you're wondering where the protein is, there's actually about 18.5 grams of protein per serving, and this is about 6 servings here. Plus, I was just looking at my Parmesan Reggiano that I got from Aldi, and there's apparently 10 grams of protein in a 1-inch cube on this, so that's gonna add some protein too. So plenty of protein in this meal in case you're wondering, but you can definitely add any meat to this if that's what you like. Got a little bit of cheese left from another package. I'm kind of obsessed with using a microplane right now for cheese. I just love the little tiny pieces. Looks amazing. Oh my goodness, I can't wait to eat. So good. Now with the rest of that Parmigiano Reggiano, I decided to make an authentic fettuccine Alfredo. Now, if you have ever seen anybody make fettuccine Alfredo before, you probably have seen them use heavy cream. That actually is not the regular way to make fettuccine Alfredo. If you were to order it in Italy, it's actually a lot simpler than that, which is good because I never have heavy cream on hand. So I'm just going to be cooking some ditalini pasta, which is, they call it macaroni salad pasta, I guess, at the store. And I've made sure that I salted the water because that's the only place that there's going to be any seasonings at all in this. And when the pasta is almost done cooking, I'm going to keep some of that pasta water on hand, about a cup or so, and that's going to help with the sauce later. Now, after I've melted the butter in a large pan, I'm going to turn off the heat and let the butter cool a little bit because I don't want it to be super, super hot. I'm going to add my drained pasta and all of the shredded Parmigiano Reggiano, and I'm going to add a little bit of pasta water. And now that pasta water, I also let cool a little bit as well because we don't want it to be 200 degrees. We want it to make sure that it's not too hot. Now I'm just going to mix together everything and add a little bit of pasta water at a time until everything comes together and it's nice and creamy. If the ingredients are too hot, you're not going to end up with a creamy sauce, so just keep that in mind. Make sure everything cools a little bit before you mix it all together. And that's it. It is so delicious, just like this. I really hope you give this one a try. It's so good. Next, I'm making one of my all-time favorite chicken soups. And I hope you love this one. If you haven't made it already, you need to make it. So this chicken was at the bottom of my freezer and I forgot to thaw it out. Just put it in there, topped it with water. I had some scraps in my freezer. I always keep my scraps from my onions, celery, carrots, and potatoes. I just used some of the onion scraps and added those. Normally I use like a half an onion. Then I added some sugar, some salt, some fish sauce, 1 star anise, and a cinnamon stick, but you can add more if you like. Some whole peppercorns and some whole cloves, and just let that start simmering. I know the chicken is still frozen, so it's going to take a little while, but I did break it apart once it started to get going there. Then I just simmered that for about 45 minutes covered. And then these noodles from Aldi, which they are back, I cooked those separately, put them in a bowl with the chicken, and then just topped it with the broth. This is a super easy chicken pho. This is kind of a modified version of the recipe on My Healthy Dish, and it just turns out so good every time. I'll have another fridge and pantry cleanout video for you soon. I don't know when it'll be ready, maybe a week or two. But in the meantime, I am creating my next meal plan, and it's going to be high protein again, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do dairy free or gluten free or what kind of special ingredients I'm going to be using for this next one. So if you have any special requests, please put them down below in the comments so I keep that in mind when I'm creating this next meal plan. That should be ready for you soon. I'm creating it now, so I'll be cooking and editing away as fast as I can. Now I do have my meal planning guide available now as a paperback, a hardcover, and a digital download. So those are all available now on Amazon and Shopify. I'll have all the links for you down below in the description. I hope you got some ideas from this video, and I will have more ideas and recipes for you soon, so keep an eye out. And YouTube thinks you want to watch another video, so go ahead and click on that. Enjoy that one too, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye.